Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. It's a beautiful day today, isn't it? And it is finally championship weekend, conference championship weekend. I'm your host, Zach McDaniel, and this is Screen Pass. Today, we got three top performers and performances. Let's get into it. Number three, the Wisconsin Badgers. Freshman running back uh, Jonathan Taylor had 149 yards and a touchdown. Alex Hornibrook tossed three touchdowns, and the Badgers limited Minnesota to 133 yards of total offense. Wisconsin has now tied a school record with 12 wins. Now they need one more victory to secure a playoff berth. They play Ohio State this next weekend. The number two top performance from last week would be UCF. Quarterback Mackenzie Milton threw for 373 yards and four touchdowns. He also rushed for a touchdown. This game against South Florida was an absolute thriller. Mike Hughes had a go-ahead 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown with less than 90 seconds left, which helped UCF hold off South Florida 49-42. The Knights clinched the American Athletic East Division title and, most importantly, keep their New Year's Six bowl hopes alive. Now, they are undefeated this year. Undefeated. 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, they went 0-12. 0-12. And 51 players from the 0-12 squad are still on this squad. So, just an incredible job Scott Frost has done with that program. And the number one performance from last week, the Auburn Tigers. Man, are they rolling. After coughing up a 20-point lead to LSU in the middle of October, Auburn saw its championship hopes become extremely thin. But Saturday, they played Alabama. Jarrett Stidham threw for 237 yards, had a touchdown run. Running back Kerryon Johnson rushed for 104 yards and a touchdown. He also had a touchdown pass. The defense held Alabama to 14 points. They won 26-14. The Tigers clinched the SEC West and still definitely have a shot of making the playoffs. So that was my top performances. Now let's move into the not top performances from last week. Number three, Florida. The Florida Gators 4-6, now 4-7 after losing to Florida State, who also had a 4-6 record before that game. Florida limped into the offseason by losing 38-22 at home to Florida State. They had four turnovers and another, it was just a terrible, terrible showing of offense by the Gators. Florida's season included losses such as LSU, Georgia, and Florida State, and Florida will not make a bowl game. But good news for Florida, they have hired Mississippi State, former Mississippi State head coach Dan Mullen. So, yeah. Number two, Tennessee, another program that fired their coach a couple weeks ago. Butch Jones was fired. This was Tennessee's 8th loss of the year. They finished the season 0-8 in the SEC, most in program history. Or their 8th loss was the most in program history. And this year marks the program's first winless finish in SEC play. Uh, they almost had Greg Schiano, and the fans wanted to start a little revolt, uh, a little rebellion, or whatever you want to call it. But so he got fired before he got hired, really, and now they're looking at names such as uh, John Gruden, still Lane Kiffin, uh, names they probably wouldn't get. But good luck to Tennessee in finding their next head coach. And number 1, Alabama. Now, it isn't every week you're going to find Alabama on this list, but they're here because they're here for a couple reasons. They got dominated in the loss to Auburn, and that loss put Auburn in the SEC championship. And now Alabama, with one loss, only one loss, is sitting right outside of the SEC championship and will most likely not make it to the playoffs for the first time in the playoffs existence. All right, so now I'm gonna give you some of the upsets from last week. Number 3, Notre Dame at Stanford. We didn't have a show last week, so I picked Stanford, but I guess you all wouldn't know that because we didn't have a show last week. But good pick for me, I guess. Stanford won 38-20. That gave Notre Dame 3 losses on the season. Number 2, undefeated Miami lost at Pitt 24-14. And number 1, Ole Miss at Mississippi State. Mississippi State cannot overcome the loss of their star quarterback, Nick Fitzgerald. They lost 31-28 to Ole Miss. All right, championship week. Conference championship week, that is. I got 6 matchups for you. We're going to start with the Friday night game, the Pac-12 championship. That's going to feature number 12 Stanford versus number 10 USC. Stanford has looked dominant in recent weeks, but I'm going Stanford or USC. I think Sam Darnold's going to play really good football, and USC will win the Pac-12. Number 5, the AAC championship. Number 20 Memphis versus number 14 UCF. The Knights are undefeated, and they're going to stay undefeated, 12-0, AAC champions. UCF gets it done against Memphis. Number 4, the Big 12 championship. These two teams played earlier in the season, just like Stanford, USC. They played earlier in the season. Oklahoma was dominant. I think this is going to be a really close game, closer than the first matchup, TCU and Oklahoma. I'm still going to go Oklahoma. Oklahoma finds a way to make it to the playoffs. Close game, though. Close game. I'm going Oklahoma. Number 3, we got number 6 Georgia versus number 2 Auburn. Auburn looked dominant last week against Alabama. These two played earlier in the season also. Auburn just dominated the whole way through. This one is also going to be a close game, and I'm going to go with Auburn. Jarrett Stidham, Kerryon Johnson, they look really good. Now for the Big 10 championship, we got number 8 Ohio State versus number 4 Wisconsin, undefeated Wisconsin. If Ohio State wins this game, I think they'll probably make it to the playoffs. Now, if Wisconsin wins, they're definitely in. But if Ohio State wins, it's either between them or one-loss Alabama, who was left out of the SEC championship. Uh, but I don't think Ohio State gets it done Saturday. I'm going with the undefeated Badgers. Wisconsin pulls it out, and they will make it to the playoffs, being the only undefeated team other than UCF in FBS. And number one, the ACC championship game. Number 7, Miami, who suffered kind of a heartbreaking loss. Not really heartbreaking. I mean, it was Pitt, but they suffered a loss last week. They're looking to bounce back against number 1, Clemson Tigers. Clemson's been here before. Miami hasn't been here in ever. This is their first ACC championship game. Therefore, I'm going with Clemson. They've been more dominant recently. They're going to continue that through the playoffs as well. I'm going number 1, Clemson. So, with that being said, here's how the playoffs will look, or should look. Number 4, Wisconsin. Number 3, Oklahoma. Number 2, Auburn. And number 1, Clemson. Number 1, Clemson will play number 4, Wisconsin. And number 2, Auburn will play number 3, Oklahoma. Just my prediction of what will happen. Yeah. And that is it for this episode of Screen Pass. Make sure you follow Screen Pass at screen_pass on Twitter. Do that. I'll be posting a lot of stuff on there, a lot of cool things about college football and maybe NFL stuff. So yeah, that is it for this episode. See you later.